Well, let me just start with some breaking news, some good news. I just saw 4 water scoopers and air tankers fly overhead toward the Pacific Ocean, make a few circles, and head back out. So that means that there is an aerial assault in the air working right now to put out these flames. I'm in the Palisades, Chris, so a little bit up from PCH. This is the heart of the Palisades, the village, and part of the area that wasn't as changed by time as some of the other areas. But now it's changed. Now it's completely gone. I mean, what I'm standing in front of right now, I think was a barber shop. When I grew up, this was a barber shop. There was a little jewelry shop. There was a boutique clothing store to the left here. The Chamber of Commerce, which held all of the historical information about this historic town, this very old town, is completely gone. We're on Arnie Wishnick Lane here. And Arnie Wishnick was a guy who was in charge of the Chamber of Commerce for decades, loved this place, kept all of the records in that small building. He recently died a few years ago, and now there's nothing left of this building. You got to hope that somebody digitized some of those albums, those records, those photos, the pictures of the elementary school, which, by the way, is just right over here. You can see a little bit of green grass there, which is heavily, heavily damaged. The elementary school, by the way, that I went to is over 100 years old, stood for over 100 years. Now it's partially demolished. But there were pictures of it in that Chamber of Commerce. There was a really wonderful music class called Amazing Music. You could buy a guitar, you could get guitar lessons. It was right down here. You could do karate next door. My brother did guitar lessons down here. You could also, there was a little art studio that I learned how to use chalk and pastels in. That's all gone. It's all gone. And it's just still worse if you look across the street, and we've talked a lot about this building, but I think it bears talking a little bit more about it. This was the Starbucks. Okay, it's a Starbucks. Okay, who cares about a Starbucks, right? But it was a Starbucks. It was one of the first ones in the country. It was a big deal when it came here. My mom used to sit on the big leather chairs drinking a cappuccino. I think at the time we called it a cappuccino. But it's gone. The facade of this place is 100 years old. It was built in 1924. I believe that at one point a fire tore through this over the years, but they were able to save the facade. The Bank of America was over here. I met my best friend in front of that Bank of America. I hope that they're able to save some of this facade again in order to preserve some of the historic nature of this beautiful, wonderful community. This place that so many people have loved for so long, the place that so many people desperately want to come back to. But I gotta say, Chris, and it breaks my heart to say this, there is not a lot to come back to. I was just over in the Alphabet Streets, which was the first place I lived in here in the Palisades. We rented, we moved around a lot. We had a tiny little bungalow over on Embry Street, and when the sun came up this morning, I took Jacob Soboroff over there, who also grew up in the Palisades, who I've known since I was a kid. I took him over there to see my first house, and there was nothing left of it. And then we walked up the street, and I took him to see my one of my best friends from childhood, his house, and there was nothing left of that. And he still lives there with his young family. I talked to him yesterday on my show. But the thing is, Chris, it was so devastated on that block and all the surrounding blocks, you couldn't tell what you were looking at. You couldn't tell which house was which. So I think I was looking at his house, but I can't really tell you. I think it could have been the one 2 doors down or the one next door. I'll show you. We took some tape of it. I'll show you just how bad it looks and why it's so hard to identify the remains. I think it was this one, but it might have been this one. They worked on the house. I mean, this is what their lives working on the house.
You can see addresses on the street, but yeah, it's all sort of indistinguishable. There's like the features like the basketball hoop in the back, or
that's, I think, the other side.
The house on the other side.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, this is where you see it. It's like there isn't, look, the faucets, the water's running there. There's not a house left standing in this neighborhood.
I can't tell if it was this house or that one. I think maybe it was this one. So, Chris, you could see, I think it actually ended up being the house a couple doors down, but the memories are all still there. And we took a lot of video just up and down these neighborhoods, went to a lot of the places I used to live. So far, not a single one is standing. I've been checking on friends' houses, haven't found one of those standing yet. I got friends who lost their own home, who lost their parents' home. I'm getting text messages still asking for photos, asking to see what's happening out here, because you really can't get through. I think they're starting to let some people in, but the police are stopping anyone who doesn't have a press credential. They're really worried about looters. I was driving through the Highlands area, the flats, a moment ago, and Sammy, watch out for that curb behind you, my cameraman, Sammy. And we were stopped by a private security guard. The neighborhood had hired a private security guard to watch over the few houses that still remain. And there are some okay streets over there because they're worried about people coming in on foot and getting into these houses. There was a news conference a little bit earlier with LA officials, and they've said that they're worried about it too. They've made a number of arrests regarding it. They don't want anyone taking advantage of this horrible situation. And I mean that, Chris. It's awful. Even if your house is still standing, and there are some lucky ones here, even if your house is still standing, there's really not anything to come left to. There's no community left. The schools are burned down. A lot of the schools, the elementary school is heavily damaged. I don't know when they're going to get back there. The high school, the private schools around here. I mean, it's just, you can come back, but you're not going to go to a grocery store. You're not going to go to the post office. Maybe you can go to Erewhon. The Erewhon, believe it or not, is still standing. The Rick Caruso project seemed to do okay. He apparently had hired private fire crews to protect this commercial area, and I think it worked clearly. But the rest of the place